Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Joe Biden and leaders of other G20 nations are gathering in India's capital, New Delhi, for a weekend summit that'll focus on international debt, food security, and the climate crisis. Biden is meeting today with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi ahead of the summit. Chinese President Xi Jinping is not attending and has instead sent China's premier to the gathering. Ahead of the summit, the British charity Oxfam accused G20 countries of failing by a wide margin to slash greenhouse gas emissions below levels needed to prevent a climate catastrophe. Those fears were echoed by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres earlier this week at the Africa Climate Summit.
To the large emitters, to the G20 countries responsible for 80% of the emissions that will be meeting this week in Delhi, assume your responsibilities. Developed countries must commit to reaching net zero emissions as close as possible to 2040.
In China, remnants of Typhoon Haikui struck Hong Kong Thursday, bringing widespread flooding and triggering landslides. More than 6 inches of rain fell on Hong Kong in less than an hour, the fastest rate of precipitation since records began in 1884. In Brazil, the death toll from a cyclone that brought flash flooding to southern states earlier this week is approaching 40. In the Mediterranean, at least 18 are dead from unprecedented storms that dropped over a year's worth of rain in less than 24 hours over some areas. On Thursday, helicopter crews were dispatched in parts of Greece to rescue residents who were trapped on their rooftops. In the Atlantic, Hurricane Lee has rapidly intensified to become this year's first Category 5 hurricane, with sustained winds of up to 165 miles per hour. Forecasters say Lee will remain north of the Caribbean islands, but could potentially strike the U.S., the Canadian East Coast, or Bermuda late next week. In Hawaii, residents of Maui are marking the one-month anniversary of the devastating wildfire that decimated the historic town of Lahaina. The official death toll is still at 115, with 380 people still missing, as some families are reckoning with the reality that their remains may never be found or identified. In more climate news, a record-breaking post-Labor Day heat wave is continuing to bring extreme weather alerts to tens of millions of people in the U.S. mainland. The record temperatures prompted many school districts to cancel outdoor activities like recess or to switch to online classes for the start of the school year. In Washington, D.C., the high temperature at Dulles International Airport reached triple digits for the first time ever in the month of September.
I think it's not normal. I have lived here for a long time, and this is incredible. Like, we are in September waiting for fall to come, and suddenly it's 100 degrees outside. So I think it has to be with the global warming.
On Thursday, Secret Service officers arrested 3 climate activists after they tied a banner to the White House fence demanding President Biden declare a climate emergency. The action came ahead of a march to end fossil fuels planned for New York City on September 17th. Hundreds of people in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region attended funerals for the 16 people killed by a Russian missile strike on a crowded marketplace Wednesday. The funerals came as a Russian attack on the city of Kryvyi Rih killed at least 1 person and wounded several others. In Brussels, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said Thursday Ukrainian forces have been making gradual progress in their counteroffensive against entrenched Russian forces on the southern and eastern fronts.
And they are making progress. Not perhaps as much as we hoped for, but they are gaining ground gradually. Some 100 meters per day.
In August, the New York Times reported the number of Ukrainian and Russian troops killed or wounded in action since Russia's invasion is approaching 500,000. In more news about Ukraine, Elon Musk, the billionaire CEO of internet satellite provider SpaceX, secretly ordered his company to deactivate its Starlink satellites as they passed above Russian-occupied Crimea last year in order to disrupt a Ukrainian sneak attack on the Russian naval fleet. That's according to an excerpt of a soon-to-be-published biography of Elon Musk written by Walter Isaacson, who reports Musk's decision prevented Ukrainian submarine drones from reaching their intended intended target Russia's Black Sea fleet. Elon Musk reportedly feared Russia would respond to an attack on Crimea with nuclear weapons. According to Isaacson, Musk said at the time, quote, "Starlink was not meant to be involved in wars. It was so people can watch Netflix and chill and get online for school and do good, peaceful things, not drone strikes," he said. North Korea announced its first tactical nuclear-armed submarine as it continues to ramp up its nuclear capabilities. This comes after reports that Kim Jong-un is planning a trip to Russia this month to discuss North Korean military aid for Putin's war in Ukraine, and where Kim could seek technical help for his nuclear and missile programs. In the United States, a federal jury has found former President Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, guilty of contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with a subpoena from the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. Navarro, who faces up to 2 years in prison and a $200,000 fine, has promised to appeal all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. In Georgia, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis has asked a court to help protect members of the special grand jury that indicted Donald Trump and 18 co-conspirators for attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 election after a far-right website published their home addresses, phone numbers, and vehicle information. Willis, who is African-American, also had her information doxed online alongside racist and derogatory comments. On Thursday, D.A. Willis sent a letter to U.S. Congressmember Jim Jordan of Ohio, the Republican chair of the House Judiciary Committee, after he announced plans for a congressional probe into her prosecution of Trump and his allies. D.A. Willis wrote, quote, "Your attempt to invoke congressional authority to intrude upon and interfere with an active criminal case in Georgia is flagrantly at odds with the Constitution," unquote. In other news from Georgia, the family of 24-year-old Chandre Delmore is demanding justice for his death after being imprisoned at the Fulton County Jail. Authorities say he died at a hospital in custody Sunday, 3 days after being found unresponsive in his cell. He's the 10th person to die in custody of the notorious Fulton Jail this year. His mother spoke at a news conference Thursday.
I wasn't expecting to see my son in the condition that he was in when I came out here. I thought I would be able to take my son with me back home, but that didn't happen. And I want answers. I want to know what happened to my son.
We'll have more on this segment later in the broadcast. In more news from Georgia, 5 protesters, at least, were arrested Thursday after they chained themselves to construction equipment at the site of Cop City, a massive $90 million police training complex in Atlanta. The action came in response to the indictment earlier this week of 61 activists on racketeering charges over their involvement in the movement to stop Cop City. 5 of them were also indicted on domestic terrorism and arson charges. This is Aola Omalara Kaplan, an Atlanta artist and one of the Cop City protesters taken into custody Thursday.
We have to stand up and take our own future into our own hands through direct actions like this. We need as many people as possible to join in this fight of nonviolent direct actions. The more of us that are willing to take the risk and come out here and put their bodies on the line to save the forest.
And in Los Angeles, actor Danny Masterson has been sentenced to 30 years to life in prison for raping 2 women he met through the Church of Scientology. He was convicted earlier this year, though the jury was hung on a 3rd rape charge. The 2 women, who have not been publicly identified, spoke at Thursday's hearing before the sentence was handed down. One of them addressed Masterson, saying, quote, "When you rape me, you stole from me. That's what rape is, a theft of the spirit," she said. Actor Leah Remini, who's been an outspoken critic of the Church of Scientology since breaking ties with it and was at Masterson's trial supporting the survivors, said in a statement, quote, "I am relieved that this dangerous rapist will be off the streets and I'm able to violently assault and rape women with the help of Scientology, a multi-billion-dollar criminal organization with tax-exempt status," she said. Masterson is best known for his role in the sitcom That 70s Show. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.